Hello everyone and welcome! In this video I'm going to show you how I painted this watercolor wreath, and as you can see, while I made a card making is the theme of this channel, the painting today I decided to put into a picture frame. This is just to show you if you do not feel like making cards, you can make something else as well. Here are the main products I will be using, just watercolor supplies. I also have a water and paper towel on the side. I taped my cardstock onto a board, but I left the left side without any tape, as the idea for this particular wreath is to have it slightly cut off on the side, and I didn't want to have any border around that area. I drew a circle. Here I used a cork coaster from IKEA. This was perfect size for the cardstock I was using, which is in the size A6. I also erased the lines just slightly, and then I started painting. I'm using 2 shades of green. If you only have one shade, you can dilute it with water to make it lighter. I started painting in a corner, or more like on the left side. I don't really have a specific way of painting leaves. Most of the time I do what feels comfortable, but specifically here I drew a line for the stem, which also helps me with the direction of the leaf, and then I painted the leaf. I painted the leaves on each side of the circle, one outside, one inside, right next to each other. At some places one leaf was higher than the other and others were connected. I didn't really have an exact plan here. I've been actually watching a few people on Instagram who mainly paint leaves, and I thought that must be so boring, but now I understand why. It is so addictive. Especially once you get the practice and try to do those 1 or 2 stroke leaves, it's so much fun. And as I said in my previous video, there are multiple ways of painting leaves, not just the ones with 1 or 2 strokes. You just need to find your style. I did try here to paint the leaves with 2 strokes. While it's not a must, it's just for fun. What helps me is to hold my brush like this, more like straight up, not like a pen, which I also did, but holding the brush straight up makes it easier for me. I started with the little stem, and then the leaf I painted with 2 strokes, one on each side. Each stroke I started with the tip of the brush, then I pressed down, making the stroke thicker, also creating a curve, and then I went back into the point of the brush. You can see here one more example in close-up. The brush is pretty small. It's a size 4 round brush, so I had to fill the middle of some spots, but you can leave them unpainted as well. And again, it is not a must to paint leaves with 1 or 2 strokes. If you are a beginner, you might watch a lot of tutorials. I do too. And to be honest, what I learned is not to take them too seriously. There are no rules that you must paint that way. In some tutorials, some people over-science everything. In tutorials, what you see is the person's style and the way how they are painting. You can try it, practice, and if that style doesn't suit you, then you try something different. For leaves, for example, you can first create an outline and fill it in, or even pre-draw a leaf with a pencil. It would take longer, but that is an option. I wasn't overly excited with every leaf that I painted here. I had to correct a few of them, but in the end, once all of it came together, I was really happy with the result. So the first layer is done, and now I took my darker green and I first painted the line of the wreath. A brown paint would be also an option, but I wanted to have everything green. You could use a long bristle brush, which is great for painting long lines, but I used the same brush as I used for the leaves. While the brush has a really nice pointy tip, my line was still a little bit wobbly, but here I actually really like it. Also, remember my videos are sped up. In reality, I take my time. I let it dry so I don't smudge the paint, and then I started painting the darker leaves. And I did the same thing as I did on the first layer. I was placing the leaves between the gaps, between the lighter leaves. Most of them were overlapping at least slightly. But again, I didn't really have an exact plan. The only idea was to paint leaves where the bottom layer was lighter and the top layer was darker. Here at this point, I thought, let me try a different size brush. There is also a size 8 in this set of these blue brushes. Instead of having to constantly fill the gaps, maybe painting with a bigger brush is a better idea. Here is again a close-up. I painted the same way as I did with the smaller brush. I'm holding the brush upright. I started with the stem and then the leaves I painted with 2 strokes, starting with the tip of the brush, then pressing down, creating a thicker stroke, going in a curve, and then pulling back up to the pointed tip. At least that was the idea. Instead, I created an outline and I had to fill it in. I don't know why, my brush just wasn't going the correct way. I did painted leaves with this brush before and I did manage to paint in 2 strokes. Here it just wasn't working. So I did switch back to the size for a brush. In this case, I found it better. I just wish there was a size 6 in this set as well. It's actually a good idea to try out different brushes. You might prefer something different, not just the size of the brush, but also the shape. I actually painted the wreath 4 times. It is truly addictive and a great practice because it's very simple. And if you are new to watercoloring, if you don't want to start painting the wreath right away, take a sheet of watercolor paper and fill it with leaves and try finding your style, what feels comfortable to you, try different brushes. And what I would also recommend, using a pencil and a printer paper and just drawing the leaves, getting used to the shapes. What I love about watercoloring, especially loose watercoloring, it's very forgiving. It doesn't need to be perfect. The wreath is finished. You can leave it as it is, but I decided to add some berries using dark blue paint. You could use any color you want. I just painted small circles or little blobs, nothing complicated, mainly in clusters of 3. I did not add any stems to the berries, just simple circles. However, a miracle has happened here. I did not add any splatter. It did not even cross my mind. If you watched my previous video, I mentioned when I use watercolors, I have the need, like there is something in me that has the need to add the splatter. But not this time. I guess the berries were enough for me. If I were making a card, I would stamp a greeting, and I will show you an example in a bit. But since I was making a painting to frame, stamping happy birthday would be a little bit weird. But I went through my stash and I found a stamp with a quote. It says, "Live every moment, laugh every day, love beyond words." If you don't have stamps, you could write something yourself, maybe using a less complicated quote. I'm not good at fancy writing, that's why I use stamps. What I was thinking, trying in the future, is to print a greeting or a quote on a printer paper, transfer it onto a watercolor cardstock, and go over it with a black pen. That might be an option for you. The stamping wasn't perfect because the cardstock is a little bit rough, so I used a black fine liner to fill the gaps. You could adhere the pen on top of a card base if you want to make a card. I was thinking using a card base in the size 5x7. I think it looks very nice, it creates a very nice frame. But because of the cost of postage, I decided to use a card base in the size A6. Not this wreath, I mean for the other wreaths that I painted. 2 of them I turned into cards, and here is one of them. And I cut the watercolor panel slightly smaller to have a nice frame, and I use a different greeting. But as I said, I wanted to put the painting I made in this video into a picture frame. I had a frame from IKEA. This one is one of the cheap ones and it didn't have a backing paper, so I created my own. I just cut down a white cardstock. I like to use a masking tape or washi on the back of the painting so it doesn't move. And then I placed it onto the white background paper, and then the whole thing I placed into the picture frame. And here is the final product. I think it looks really nice. I think this would be a perfect gift for someone. I also painted one on an A5 cardstock, so double the size, which I will be keeping in the kitchen. And here you can see all of them together. That is all for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video very soon.